Sports School is brought to you by BASF and Pride Seeds.
Real Agriculture is here at the Canadian Dairy Expo. We're joined by Aaron Stefanis from Pride Seeds. Sir, welcome.
Thank you. Welcome.
I can think of no better place than a Canadian Dairy Expo to talk about silage hybrids.
Yes.
So let's talk quickly about, I guess the first thing that always comes up is the difference between, the grain hybrid versus a silage hybrid, and that selection. Tell me about, what producers should be thinking when they're wrestling with that one.
Oh, that's a great question. We come by it all the time. So really there is, you have the silage specifics, the leafies and the BMRs, and then you have the dual purposes. Both work well. It really depends on your management system. And I think that's really what you have to look at when you're selecting your hybrids. So on the leafy BMR side, you do have a very high digestibility. That's kind of what those silage specifics are meant for. The kernel and the starch digestibility is great. But when you look at our dual purpose side, you do get a lot of benefits. Some of them are actually have very high digestibility, very high kernel digestibilities as well, and sometimes more tonnage, because at the end of the day we're growing silage for tons per acre and energy per acre. The other benefit of the dual purpose is the ability to harvest it for either high moisture corn or grain if you have too much silage. So you really have that option to actually capitalize on making a little bit more money per acre with the dual purpose. So really, they both have a management system. They both work well. I would say if you have both systems, you'd probably harvest your silage specific first, because you can't use it for grain, and then you'd probably use your grain, your dual purpose at the end, so then you can maximize on that ability to either have it as high moisture or dry corn.
Let's talk a little bit about maturities. And managing, harvest throughout, at the end of the year. When you're selecting hybrids, think about maturities.
Yep. And I think this is one of the key things that people don't really look at, because you're mature, it's all about having consistency. We always talk about, in production agriculture, we talk about consistent emergence in your bean and corn and wheat, right? Well, it's the same thing in your silo. You want to have a consistent moisture in your silo. So you shouldn't probably have one hybrid and maturity group for your whole farm. You're not going to harvest all your silage in one day. So really, you should be sitting down with your seed specialist or agronomist and figuring out which fields are going to be harvested first, and then tailoring that to the maturity groups of your silage, so you can have a nice, consistent silage moisture level within your either upright or bundle.
What about looking around your farm? You got good dirt, you got not so good dirt. Where do you position maybe the leafy hybrid? Maybe where do you put the dual purpose hybrid? Because so you got those options.
Yep, and that's a great point. I think you look at your leafy and it goes on your best dirt, because it comes down to great, like I said, great digestibility, but it doesn't have the agronomics that you have with your dual purpose hybrid. So I'd keep the leafies closer to the barn. We usually have higher fertility. Maybe in your tougher agronomic spots, you pick a really great dual purpose, because you're going to get the agronomic factors, so say drought tolerance, disease resistance, all those things out of your dual purpose that'll probably end up bringing you better quality. So it can handle those tougher agronomic situations.
Okay, final point, let's talk about the silage crop this year, 2013 past.
Yep.
A lot of talk about, whether it's varying in quality, and maybe, I guess, the conditions of harvest might have had something to do with that.
Yep, absolutely. And maybe not even at harvest specifically, but the whole growing season. So if you look at silage as a tonnage per acre this year compared to 2012, actually tonnages were excellent. We had lots of rain depending where you were. Once again, we had geographical weather again this year, but tonnages essentially were up. The big thing though is because we seem to have taller hybrids this year. They grew really fast, lots of leaf. So what does that mean? Well, our starch to stock ratio is a lot lower. So meaning we're getting less starch from the cob, because we had, the yield was still good. 50% of the yield still comes from the cob, but we also had a lot of biomass because of that tall corn. So really our starch levels are a lot less. Fiber digestibility is less as well, and that could be different factors, be it higher lignin levels or whatever, but you're also looking at that fact of the starch levels to that whole biomass plant aren't quite to where they should be. So yes, we got excellent yields, quality maybe down a little bit, compared to last year. In the drought, some people had very excellent quality because they had lots of starch and less, the exact opposite, less biomass, and so it was like rocket fuel, but the yields were dramatically low. So really, in the grand scheme of things, we're probably feeding a little bit more, but at the same time we have more to feed, so we're probably going to end up having a fairly good supply of silage for the year and ready for next year.
And it goes back to the old story, right? It really is about environment and growing conditions.
Absolutely.
What's going to end up in the feed bump?
Yep, exactly. And I would say also, to tailor onto that, just because that might happen this year doesn't mean you should switch your hybrids up. Don't think about getting a shorter hybrid for your silage. I mean, this was a definitely anomaly of a year. So just keep to what you're used to, and because you really don't want to mess up your management system, because that bunk and what you're feeding your cows is so important, and you really want to keep your feed levels good. Because that milk at the end of the day is what makes you the money.
Good stuff, Aaron. We'll look to see what happens in 2014.
Sounds good. Thanks.